How's it going, fellow Detroit Red Wings fans? So, with the Detroit Red Wings passing the halfway mark of the season a little bit ago, and, well, them being in a different position than previous seasons, where they aren't in the bottom of the league, nor are they really in the mix to make the playoffs. Now, to keep this in mind, this is as of the time of recording, Saturday morning, January 29th. So, last week we talked about the trade baits the Detroit Red Wings could look to maybe move if the deal is there. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend you go check it out before watching this video. Today we are going to take a look at who the Detroit Red Wings could look to acquire, or teams they may be able to push into giving up more than what they are trading away. Then in a later video, we will take a look at mock trades. But before we get too far into today's video, I want to give a shout out to Brendan Kaufman. We hit the 1,000 subscriber mark a little bit ago and want to start thanking you guys for making the Red Wing Nation community a community. So if you want to get a shout out, make sure you subscribe and join lots of other great fans of this team and sport. So to establish one thing, the Detroit Red Wings aren't necessarily selling their star players, but they aren't buying players who are in the twilight of their careers or just for the remainder of the season like a rental. They want to increase value, meaning close to any trade except for Larkin, Bertuzzi, Raymond, Seider, Edvinsson, and Kosa, and even a couple of those could be on the table for the right price. But any trade should be considered as long as we are getting more in return than what we are losing. So let's take a look at players the Detroit Red Wings could look to acquire. By far, the biggest need the Detroit Red Wings have is center. Not necessarily depth centers, but another star to go along with Larkin to fill in the top six. Don't get me wrong, P.S. Suter is great and all, especially for the position the Red Wings are in right now, but for this team to go from good to great, we need a center close to as good as Larkin to come in on that second line. There doesn't appear to be any answers in the system. Veleno, Rasmussen are going to be fine players and may develop to be really strong third and fourth line centers on a playoff team that can serve as a second or even first line center when injuries add up. All other centers in the system are too far out to really know. We could look to the 2022 NHL draft. It is supposed to be a really good class at center, headed by Shane Wright, but we really don't know where we will be selecting. So if a team is willing to overpay, or at least give a reasonable deal for one of their star center prospects, why not? Well, if I had to pick a team that could be a good place to shop, then look no further than the Los Angeles Kings. The Los Angeles Kings have Anze Kopitar, Adrian Kemp, Philip Deneau, and Gabriel Velarde before we even get to their prospects. The Kings have arguably the two best center prospects that are not waiting to get drafted or in the NHL. Alex Turcotte and Quinton Byfield. While yes, sure, Kopitar and a couple others will eventually fall off and eventually retire, but for right now and for a couple years, there certainly isn't enough space for all those centers. The Kings are also fairly weak at defense. Yes, in the NHL, it is doable, but looking at their prospects, it's not necessarily very deep, and their best defensive prospect being Brandon Clark, a right-handed defenseman. While the Detroit Red Wings have a number of really good defensemen coming up, especially on the left-hand side, enough that we may be able to afford to trade a prospect for a prospect, if the cards fit. I'm definitely not thinking of Edvinsson or Johansson. Both, I think, matter more to the organization than what a trade could bring in. Sebrango really doesn't have the value to get a top prospect in return, and Emil Viro has been having a rough year stat-wise, leaving really one guy, William Wallinder. Now, Wallinder is a big defenseman, one that would certainly push the Red Wings to be more competitive. But just as the Kings don't have enough space for all their center prospects coming up, the Wings don't for defense. So why don't we use the surplus of defensemen to grab one of Turcotte or Byfield? Especially Turcotte. Turcotte was selected in the same round and draft as Moritz Seider and Trevor Zegras, and he has yet to really make a difference in the NHL. Or if Yzerman likes another one of their center prospects or players, grab one of them. There will of course be draft picks and maybe another prospect or player involved in this trade to offset the values. but could potentially fix a hole in the Detroit Red Wings lineup for many years. A couple other players the Red Wings could go after would be Kirby Dach. He's having a rough season over in Chicago right now and could use a change of scenery. He's a good solid center who could definitely grow to be dominant. However, his brother was selected by the Hawks, and Seider and Dach didn't seem to really get along well at the prospect tournament a couple years ago. The Toronto Maple Leafs have Nicholas Robertson, who isn't a center but a winger, who may be able to surprise some people. They are cap strapped, so if they can force Toronto's hand, giving them a depth forward like Nemestikov, who has almost no cap hit, not to mention the Detroit Red Wings could eat even more salary away from Nemestikov's contract. And the last player or prospect I think is Morgan Frost. The center is in the Philadelphia Flyers organization and has struggled to establish himself in the NHL, despite posting pretty good numbers. If the Flyers are ready to move on him, he may be a really good pickup for the Wings. And now teams the Detroit Red Wings could look to possibly use their cap space to take advantage of, mainly Stanley Cup contending teams who may be looking for depth players when they go deep in the playoffs. As mentioned before, the Toronto Maple Leafs, majorly cap strapped and in dire need to get out of that first round. It really needs to be their year, or there will likely be trades and open positions in management coming in the summer. Another one is the Edmonton Oilers. This team started off really hot but has fallen off the train tracks. They know McDavid and Draisaitl are starting to get frustrated, having only a few playoff series wins to show so far in their career. Ken Holland has history with the Detroit Red Wings and with Zadina. It is a possibility Holland could way overpay in a trade in hopes of getting his Oilers farther into the playoffs. And last but certainly not least, the Florida Panthers. The Panthers are currently tied for first in the league with the Colorado Avalanche, and I'm sure are looking to make more noise in the playoffs than they did last year, which will prove to be a difficult task, being the other Florida team is the two-time reigning champions, and let's face it, probably the last team you want your team to be facing in the playoffs, so they likely will be looking to add some depth, mostly on defense, but offensive depth as well. We have several veterans on cheap contracts that could be made cheaper that may help the Panthers make a push, mainly thinking of Leddy, Stahl, and Nemestikov, all with loads of playoff experience. What do you guys think? Which prospects or players should the Red Wings be trying to acquire, and which cap-strapped team should the Red Wings be calling? Let us know down below. Red Wing Nation was designed to be a community of Red Wings fans that could come together and talk about all things Red Wings. If you like this video, make sure you drop a like. That way we make more content that you like. And lastly, if you're a Red Wings fan, if you're a hockey fan, if you're just a great person, make sure you subscribe and join lots of other great fans of this team and sport. And until next time, lights out in the red light district.